Amazing journey of a loved woman. 7 hidden secrets revealed as he transforms their fate forever. Sarah crouched in the dim attic light, the air thick with dust and old memories, her fingers shaking as she pulled out a weathered box. The day had started with the usual chaos, nursing shifts that drained her both emotionally and physically, but now, an inexplicable sense of urgency clawed at her. What if she found something worth holding on to? Wouldn't that be a change? She pried it open, revealing a trove of forgotten watercolor paintings, vibrant colors hidden beneath layers of neglect, certainly not the burden she had expected to unearth. But with every brushstroke, every trembling letter hinting at her grandmother's artistic dreams, the weight of her own mundanity crashed down harder. Here she was 40-something, juggling 2 exhausting jobs, collapsing under a life riddled with financial anxiety, while her daughter Emma, bright and promising, looked to her for guidance. The irony was not lost on Sarah, a legacy revealed, yet another damning reminder of her own unfulfilled passions. Could she embrace the artist hidden within? The thought felt absurd. How could a nurse with no formal training ever expect acceptance in a world dominated by pretentious galleries? She almost chuckled at the sheer idea, but there was that gnawing temptation, a flicker refusing to extinguish. What if, just what if, she could carve a space of her own? Suddenly aware of the emotional tumult rising inside her, Sarah wrestled with a wave of inadequacy. The weight of societal expectations wrapped around her chest like a vice. Could she, as a single mother with so many responsibilities, afford to dream? Would it be selfish not to prioritize Emma's future above her own aspirations? The thought made her stomach clench. All these years, she had strived to instill values of integrity and perseverance in Emma while burying her own desires in the ground. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Then entered Ethan, the gallery owner's sharp, condescending voice echoing in her mind. What gives you the right, Sarah? A mere nurse, he would no doubt scoff at her lack of pedigree and expertise. She could feel his disdain like a crushing weight pushing her down, exacerbating her internal battle. Yet, the audacity of his mockery ignited a desperate rebellion inside her. She had fought hard for everything in life. Why should she let this snobby gatekeeper snuff out her sparks of passion? But she wasn't alone. Emma's unwavering belief in her mother buoyed her even through moments of self-doubt. Their kitchen turned into a chaotic shared studio, paint splatters on the floor as they bantered, laughed, and sometimes even cringed at the mess they created. Yet the fear of failing Emma lurked behind every brushstroke. What if Sarah's attempts to break free didn't serve as an example, but rather added another weight to Emma's already burdened shoulders? As the stakes rose, Sarah discovered a mentor in Jake, a former art critic seeking his own redemption after the scars of failure marred him. Intrigued by her work, he saw brilliance where others saw a muddled dream. And yet, every encouraging word he spoke only stirred deeper fears of inadequacy. Within her, could the flawed woman standing before him even hope to come close to the caliber of art that existed in high society? The echoes of past ridicule curled around her neck, tightening. How could she gather enough strength to face the art show ahead, knowing Ethan's voice loomed like a storm cloud threatening to drown her dreams? Just as self-doubt threatened to unravel her at the very moment she should be reclaiming her voice, an urgency surged within her. The path to transformation bore no map, only an agonizing choice. Determined, with Emma's faith lighting the way, Sarah stood at the precipice of the unknown. Her heart raced, lungs strained, willpower roared to life. But would it be enough? Sarah stared at the box of watercolor paintings, her heart thundering ominously in her chest. Each piece seemed to be a portal, a whisper from the past beckoning her to embrace her neglected dreams. With trembling hands, she gently removed a bright landscape, colors dancing in the light like a forgotten melody reclaiming its voice. This moment felt fragile yet potent, overflowing with possibilities, yet shadowed by the fear that followed her like a stubborn ghost. With the paintbrush in her hand, a tool that had lay dormant for years, Sarah felt an electric jolt surge through her. But as quickly as the spark ignited, her insecurities lashed back. Could she honor her grandmother's artistic legacy without abandoning her responsibilities as a mother and nurse? The juxtaposition felt intolerable. Emma peered over Sarah's shoulder, excitement sparking in her eyes. "Mom, look. You're really good. You just need to show it." With her encouragement, Sarah felt a cautious flicker of hope. Could this be a moment of reckoning rather than the familiar grip of failure? But doubt still clouded her thoughts, pushing them away like shadows creeping in. Memories of harsh criticisms echoed in the corners of her mind, Ethan's derision sharper than any blade. What if the art world was as unforgiving as she feared? A mere nurse? The word rang with venom. How could she navigate a landscape so demanding? Taking a deep breath, Sarah set her resolve. This wasn't merely about painting, it was about unearthing her identity buried under layers of duty and sacrifice. The decision loomed. Would she plunge headfirst into this unknown world, risking failure yet again? The questions tangled in her mind like wild vines. They threatened to choke her ambitions. That evening, with Emma asleep and the weight of silence enveloping her, Sarah poured herself into her sketches, the soft cadence of her pencil breaking the stillness. She let the strokes flow, surrendering to a rhythm only the art knew. A timid smile emerged as she began translating emotions into shapes and colors. Each mark on paper felt like a battle won. But behind that victory lingered the now familiar apprehension. What does it mean to truly express yourself? She pondered. The essence of her being was trapped inside countless obligations. Each artwork from her grandmother, though a testament to dreams, also illuminated the silent screams of dreams unfulfilled. In defiance of quiet resignation, Sarah added layers, delicate blooms of color, each symbolizing her reclaimed spirit. Encouraged by her progress, the following day brought a flash of clarity. Sarah sought Jake, her mentor, and the only one who had seen potential in her chaotic strokes. "I want to present my work," she declared, voice barely above a whisper, vulnerability etched across her features. His brow furrowed not in skepticism, but with understanding, as if recognizing the storm raging within her. With encouragement, Jake began setting up informal gatherings for her to share her art with a few local artists. Each session became an arena where her courage was tested and her vulnerability unveiled. She painted, discussed, and even stumbled only to rise with renewed resolve. But deeper fears continued to bubble under the surface. Would this journey allow her to heal, or was it simply a diversion from confronting the truth about her life? With the looming art show date drawing near, Ethan's mockery lingered like a specter overshadowing her emerging confidence. As her eyes landed on her newly completed work, a sudden wave of determination swept through her. This particular piece shimmered with vibrancy, reflecting both joy and hardship, a visceral representation of the journey she'd undertaken, not just as an artist, but as a woman battling through life's myriad challenges. Yet just as she scribbled her name on the corner, a new voice emerged in her psyche, skeptical yet familiar. What if you fail? Caught between fear and desire, Sarah prepared to confront not only Ethan but also the parts of herself she'd kept hidden. A flicker of defiance ignited within her. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, she breathed deeply, readying herself for whatever awaited. The ground beneath her felt both shaky and exhilarating. This was just the beginning. What awaited Sarah as she stepped into the unknown? Would she defy the confines of expectation, or would the weight of doubt crush her newfound aspirations? With the afternoon sun streaming through her studio window, Sarah took a step back from the canvas, examining the vibrant strokes that seemed to pulse with life. Each hue and curve told a part of her story, a story not just about art, but about reclaiming a piece of herself long abandoned. The familiar flicker of anxiety taunted her again, whispering reminders of her past failures. Yet today, it felt less overpowering. Today, maybe, she could confront it head-on. "Why do I keep doubting myself?" she muttered, frustration lacing her voice. It wasn't just doubt. It was an intrinsic belief that she would never be enough, not as an artist, not as a mother, nor as a partner. The very thought felt like heavy chains binding her spirit. Thinking of the upcoming gathering with the local artists made her stomach twist. Part of her longed for acceptance, for that kind of community she had always yearned for but never sought. The weight of expectation hung around her neck like a noose. Was she grasping for something unattainable, a fleeting dream that would slip through her fingers? She pulled out her journal, the one filled with sketches and musings, and flipped to a blank page. With a deep breath, she began to pour out her thoughts, transforming her fears into ink. What if the art felt wrong? What if they laughed? The mental barrier seemed insurmountable, and yet the rhythm of her pen felt liberating. Each word solidified her resolve. Her thoughts shifted. What if I let them see me? That vulnerable question hung over her head like a challenge. To bare her soul, both through her artwork and her persona, felt terrifying but also exhilarating. It was time to face herself, to show Ethan that he did not have the power to define her, not anymore. As she scribbled, Jake's words floated to the surface, a catalyst she desperately needed during this moment of clarity. Art isn't about perfection, it's about expression. That mantra echoed in her mind as she swiftly sketched a rough draft of the piece she intended to present, a kaleidoscope of colors reflecting her triumph over fear. But amidst her creative fervor, anxiety tightened its grip, morphing into something even darker. If I show this, if they don't understand, what then? A constellation of potential outcomes spiraled in her mind, each one more daunting than the last. She grappled with the imagined criticisms, their eyes judging her worth. Bearing herself fully felt like stepping onto a precipice. She pondered how deeply rooted her perceptions of failure were, echoes of Ethan's dismissive comments clawing at the edges of her confidence. Realizing those echoes no longer defined her became a groundbreaking revelation. Yet another layer of her identity awaited exploration. What did she want her art to say about her? As days passed, she worked diligently, infusing her sketches with raw emotion, each brushstroke shredding layers of self-doubt. But no matter the glittering colors on her palette, the nagging voice never quieted. "You're not a real artist." Feeling cornered by her internal conflict, Sarah reached for her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she landed on the one name that mattered, the name of her grandmother. The voice of love and encouragement that had shaped her early dreams. "Mom," she whispered, pulling in a shaky breath. Before she could talk herself out of it, she hit call. "Sarah." Her mother's cheery tones sprung forth like a bubble of warmth, instantly wrapping around her insecurities. "How is the painting coming along?" That simple question pierced through the fog of her reluctance. "It's coming along well. But, Mom, what if it isn't good enough?" Her mother's laughter rang out like music. "Oh, honey, good enough isn't the goal. Art is raw and real, and you have that in spades. You've got to break that cycle of fear." Empowered by her mother's belief and feeling the tide shift within her, Sarah knew it was time to silence the doubts. She summoned her courage, jotting a fresh intention into her journal. "To create is to live. I will no longer hide." With renewed conviction, she returned to her canvas, ready to defend her spirit, her artistry. It was time to step into the light once more, not just as a mother or a nurse, but as Sarah, the artist she always was and aimed to become. But as she painted fervently, a new challenge loomed in her mind, one that hadn't yet surfaced. What would Ethan do when he tasted the bitterness of her defiance? As the brush swayed across the canvas, the yet unanswered question wrapped itself around her excitement. What pushback would she face, and how ready was she to confront it? With the air thickening around her, Sarah focused her attention on the canvas, each stroke an act of rebellion against the lingering shadows of doubt. The colors beneath her brush ignited a fire within her chest. This was not mere paint. It was her identity coalescing into a tangible form. Yet, with every burst of enthusiasm, the looming specter of Ethan's return whispered taunts, chilling her resolve. He had always considered her artistic pursuits a hobby, a diversion from real life. Now, he was an impending storm on her horizon, threatening to unravel the fragile tapestry she was weaving. Casting aside the unsettling thoughts, she pressed on, determined to encapsulate her truth. Each hue was a reminder that she could transform chaos into beauty. Yet, with this fierce independence blooming inside her, she also felt a prickling fear. What if she had to face Ethan with this declaration of herself firmly intact? Would he dismiss her again, or worse, try to manipulate her back into silence? The thought made her hands tremble, her brush hesitating midair. Taking a moment to breathe, Sarah set the brush down and closed her eyes. She could feel the pulse of her work despite it being incomplete, a raw, unrefined energy thrumming beneath the surface. Folding her hands into her lap, she allowed the memories of her grandmother to flood in, her words like a soothing balm. Create from your heart, Sarah. Fear is a thief, robbing you of your joy. Wisdom seasoned with love wrapped around her like the warmth of a summer sun. Reaching for her journal, she opened to that fresh page and began to write, not words, but a manifesto. I am an artist. My struggles are my depth, and my voice deserves to be heard. As she wrote, she felt the chains of previous expectations fall away, leaving a newfound lightness in their wake. Yet the thought of the gathering filled her stomach with fireflies. It was the first time she would share her work publicly. Would the group be kind? Would they appreciate her struggles depicted in color? She paused, staring at the hastily written words. If she turned them into art, would they judge her story? Or would they find connection in her vulnerabilities? Suddenly, she clutched the pencil like a sword. This was about more than just colors on fabric. This was a stand against the whisperings of her past. She had a crucible moment approaching. The thought of stepping onto that stage acceptance on the horizon sparked both hope and trepidation. But she could no longer operate in fear's realm. She needed to transform it into energy that propelled her forward. What if she took that fear and painted it? Would it create pure chaos, or would it forge a path of authenticity through her art? The sunlight shifted, casting patterns through her window, illuminating the canvas before her as though it was daring her. Sarah glanced back at her half-finished piece, a mix of splashes and too many emotion-laden colors. She could see herself in it, vulnerable yet fierce. She needed to challenge Ethan, but deeper than that, she needed to rebuke the internal narrative that clouded her creativity. Just as she picked up her brush again, the phone buzzed on her table. Glancing at the screen, her heart surged with anticipation. It was a message from Jake, whose steady encouragement had once been the compass guiding her artistic journey. Excited to see your work next week. Remember, it's all about expressing you. She felt a deep connection to those words, anchoring her amidst the turmoil. It was time to expose her narrative. The transformative shift she had initiated in her life culminated now. Would she fortify the artist within, or allow doubt to creep in uninvited? Resolved, she dipped her brush in a scarlet hue, the color of passion and courage, and let it fly across the canvas, allowing her heart to lead. This was her declaration of intent, a fiery oath that she would paint her truth, regardless of the consequences. As the color spread, a radiance began to take shape, illuminating her vision and flooding her with an exhilarating sense of freedom. But just beneath that exhilaration, an undercurrent of anxiety lurked. Could she withstand the impending confrontation with Ethan? How would she remain true to herself if faced with his brand of cynicism? With each stroke exhilarating her spirit, she knew the journey was far from over. The moment of truth loomed closer each day, a deep, rusted lock of her past that waited to be confronted. Sarah realized that the decision to embrace her art was connected not only to her passion but also to an uncharted territory, the space she would defend against the world and hopefully reclaim herself from. And in that knowledge, a wave of fierce determination swelled within her. She would not just create art, She would craft a narrative that showcased a resilience for herself and for everyone else who had been told they were not enough. The gathering awaited her, not as an artist seeking validation, but as a warrior ready to face her fears. But the question gnawed at the edges of her excitement. What would Ethan say when confronted with the empowered version of the woman he once dismissed? Would he see the brilliance in her defiance, or would his disappointment render the light dim? She willed her brush back to the canvas as the once distant storm loomed closer. The brush glided over the canvas, weaving vibrant threads of her truth into a tapestry that spoke louder than words. Sarah felt as if she had stepped into a whirlwind, her heart racing with each stroke, each layer adding depth to her creation. She had started the day anxious, but in this moment, the paint was her voice, the canvas her stage. The conversations swirling inside her began to quiet as she let the artistry dictate her actions. Still, beneath the surface, a current of anxiety surged. The gathering wasn't just about unveiling her work, it was about revealing herself. The fear of vulnerability clawed at her consciousness, and she realized this was merely the beginning. She could feel the looming confrontation with Ethan as palpably as the paint beneath her fingertips. What if her art wasn't sufficient to hold the weight of his cynicism? As her heart raced, she stepped back from the canvas, examining the interplay of colors, the mingling shades that captured her fears and triumphs alike. Those colors, once mere pigments, now represented battles fought and won, though the war wasn't over. Sarah took a deep breath, seeking solace in her own resolve. This was her evolution away from that girl who felt shackled by doubt and towards the fierce, unapologetic artist she was becoming. But lurking in the corners of her mind was an unsettling notion. What if she couldn't rise to the occasion? What if, when confronted with Ethan, the power of her art crumbled under the weight of a simple remark, a single eye roll? The predators of her past whispered reminders of her inadequacy. It felt as though doubt echoed in the hollow spaces of her studio, mocking her newfound courage. She cast a pained look at her work, which oscillated between chaos and beauty. What would it take for her to fully embrace the artist she had always been? The truth was, a battle raged not just with Ethan, but within herself. Every vibrant stroke she had made was both a declaration of freedom and a confrontation of lingering fears. Determined to turn those anxieties inside out, Sarah drummed her fingers against the table, her mind racing through strategies. Each brushstroke had the potential to tell her story, but perhaps she needed to understand herself within that story first. She pulled out her journal and jotted down specific moments, memories that had shaped her perception of art and its value. One entry caught her eye. "Art is not a hobby, it's survival." Those words resonated deeply, and she recognized that the act of creation was as vital as breathing itself. She flipped the page to draft plans for her presentation, weaving together the narrative of her work with the emotions that fueled it. Would articulating her journey tether her to vulnerability in a way that protected her from Ethan's disparagement? As she scribbled, the unexpected clarity that emerged ignited her belief in herself once more. She had faced worse than Ethan. She had overcome her own internal prison. It felt liberating to confront not only her artistic aspirations, but also her history with him. Every fear she had felt in the past, the whispers of inferiority, were paving the way for a robust foundation. The realization that she'd outgrown their dynamics began to unravel something newfound within her. This wasn't just about art. It was a reclamation of her narrative, an evolution of her identity that rejected his purview. The deep, rusted lock of her history was ready to be picked, and it wouldn't bind her again. With renewed fervor, she made bold strokes of midnight blue dark, rich and powerful. She asserted her place both in the art world and in her life. This was not just a demonstration of creativity. It was a confrontation with her past, a declaration that she would not allow it to dictate her future. But as the clock ticked down to the gathering, an unsettling thought intruded. What if this confrontation with Ethan didn't go the way she envisioned? What if he chose that very moment to unleash the full weight of his disdain? What if she faltered in that moment of truth? Sarah paused, gripping her brush tightly, feeling a storm of emotions converge. Despite the clarity she found that day, the reality of facing her fears brought forth both trepidation and adrenaline. There was no turning back now. She was standing at the precipice of something monumental. Would she rise as the woman she had fought so hard to become, or would the echoes of her past reverberate through the moment, threatening to unravel all she had built? Stepping closer to the canvas, she felt the fine line between courage and fear draw taut, the future waiting just beyond reach. But, she thought, this was only the beginning. The time had come to face not only Ethan, but every narrative she wished to rewrite. The air shimmered with possibility as she turned to her canvas one last time, determined to paint not just a picture, but a powerful statement of who she had become and who she was destined to be. What would that confrontation reveal about her strength, and could she truly claim the authenticity she envisioned? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that danced on the walls of Sarah's studio, mirroring the whirlpool of emotions inside her. Each moment leading up to the unveiling felt like a tightrope walk. She was caught between her hard-fought resolve and the gravitational pull of self-doubt. Her thoughts spiraled relentlessly. What if the vibrant hues of her spirit didn't translate to the audience? What if her recollections of pain and triumph fell on deaf ears? Or worse, brought forth ridicule? Yet, as she prepped for the evening, she found herself revisiting old sketches tucked in the corners of her workspace. Each piece was a reflection of her evolution, a glimpse into her creative milestones. There, amidst the crumpled pages, she found an old drawing of a phoenix rising from ashes, an emblem of her resilience. It struck her like lightning, a potent reminder that growth often comes after a good, hard burn. She stood before her canvas, hesitant yet invigorated, and tapped into that latent energy inside her. The interviews and critiques she had braced for began to surface in her mind. However, instead of fear, she tried a different approach. She turned them into a touchstone to validate her journey. With each brushstroke, she envisioned how she would articulate her work not just to please, but to dismantle the barriers erected by Ethan and her past. This was not merely an art show, it was an act of self-affirmation and redemption. Her heart raced as she pieced together the narrative she would present. What if she led with her awakening, her growth? Standing tall at the precipice of vulnerability, she felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. No longer was she asking for permission to exist in her art, she was declaring her right to belong. Time stretched as she completed her final touches. Every detail was deliberate, a silent testament to fights waged within her. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, picturing Ethan's face in the crowd. Would he recognize the strength hidden beneath her paint-laden exterior? Would he understand that the pieces represented not just her past but her transformation? As she stepped away and observed her work, clarity dawned on her. This was not only a confrontation with Ethan, it was a confrontation with herself, a way to shine a light on the haunted corners of her memory. The narratives of her childhood echoed back, the taunts, the dismissals, and how they had molded her perception of art as something unworthy for the opinions of another. No more. She would be her own voice tonight. With the events start looming, Sarah prepared the talking points that would stitch together her journey through the tumult of life and the powerful outlet of art as salvation. She wrote down the mantra she had adopted: art gives voice to the silenced. Would sharing that thought unearth empathy from others, perhaps even a grudging respect from Ethan? The hour drew near, and adrenaline coursed through her, electrifying and terrifying. Each breath felt fuller than the last, fortified by a unique blend of vulnerability and potential. Stepping into her shoes felt like slipping into a suit of armor, one that shielded her yet allowed her to wield her creativity like a sword. As she walked toward the front where the gathering awaited, the blend of anxiety and exhilaration transformed into fierce determination. She would not just reveal her artwork, but unleash a narrative that had shaped her journey, a narrative that intertwined her true self with every brushstroke. With every step, she felt lighter, more certain of her capacity to withstand the storm of judgment. The art of vulnerability was powerful, and sharing her journey could redefine who she was and how she perceived herself in the presence of critics. Stronger than her doubts, Sarah zeroed in on one singular objective: to own her story. But as she reached for the microphone, the crowd's murmur sent a chill of apprehension through her. All eyes turned toward her, curious and expectant. What if Ethan cast a shadow over her moment? Would she stand the test of facing his disbelief, or would his cynicism snuff out her flame? Just as Sarah opened her mouth to speak, a familiar figure pushed through the throng, his expression unreadable. The moment hung suspended, teetering on the edge of destiny. Would she be able to illuminate her truth amidst the specter of his skepticism, or would doubt steal her thunder in that intensely fraught moment? As Sarah stood in front of the audience, the weight of their collective gaze bore down on her. Ethan emerged through the crowd, his presence commanding the space, and for a heart-stopping moment, she was frozen. Memories cascaded through her, laughter shared, dreams whispered, and ultimately, the broken shards of self-worth that had resulted from his continuous disapproval. Taking a breath, she steadied herself, absorbing the silence surrounding her. This was not merely his moment to critique, nor was it a stage for her insecurities. This was the apex of her journey, and the audience an amalgamation of hopes, fears, and desires deserved to hear her truth. Her resolve solidified. She had painted not only for herself, but also for every individual who had felt unseen and unheard. Thank you all for being here tonight. This collection represents a culmination of my journey through pain and healing, she began, her voice trembling but clear. The openness in her tone drew in the crowd, silencing their underlying chatter. As she recounted her life's narrative's brushstrokes that illustrated not just moments of despair, but bursts of discovery, her confidence grew. Each anecdote was a thread weaving her art into the fabric of her existence. It was here that she began to reclaim the story that Ethan had once tried to rewrite. Thank you, she thought, for the lesson in resilience. Her vulnerability was transforming into power. Ethan's face remained impassive, but inside, Sarah felt a shift. The earlier panic morphed into a laser focus. She no longer harbored the need for his validation. She was speaking not just to those in attendance, but also to the inner child who had hidden away, feeling inadequate. Art, to me, is an expression of survival, she declared, her voice gathering strength as she gestured to her canvases. Each piece is a reminder that we can rise like the phoenix, emerging stronger from our trials. A wave of understanding rippled through the room, and she saw nods and expressions of empathy blooming. As she transitioned to discuss a particular piece of vibrant explosion of color representing her rekindled identity, she spotted Ethan shifting in his seat. It was subtle, but she could see the flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps contemplation, or even a hint of regret. The energy shifted further when Sarah introduced her mantra, "Art gives voice to the silenced." She held her ground, locking eyes with various listeners. In that moment, she realized she was not only letting them in but also ushering herself out of the shadows. She had laid bare her struggles, triumphs, and the inevitable scars that came from living authentically. With each word poured out, burdens she didn't know she still carried began to lighten. She hadn't just come here to exhibit her artwork. She was dismantling the walls built by fear and judgment. The moment she had anticipated the confrontation with Ethan came, yet it sparked an unexpected surge of momentum within her. "This isn't just art," she said, her gaze steady on him now. "It's a testament to every moment that contributed to who I am today. It's not for your approval anymore, Ethan. It's for me." Silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken words, yet Sarah felt liberated. As the applause erupted around her, she soaked in the newfound validation from strangers. Those who could see her journey, not the painful echoes of the past that once molded her identity. Yet, bittersweet thoughts flickered in the back of her mind. Had she truly severed the ties to his judgment, or would it linger like a ghost? Though exhilarated by the understanding she was gaining, uncertainty gnawed at her. Claiming her voice felt powerful, but the lingering specter of judgment whispered insidiously. Would this breakthrough be enough to fortify her against future doubts? With the crowd's reaction still buzzing in her ears, she faced Ethan one last time, seeking clarity. Would he be able to respect her narrative shift, or would this moment dissolve back into the shadows they had both known? In that charged moment of connection, a sudden realization struck her. Ethan wasn't just an antagonist. He was a reminder of the resilience she had unearthed within herself. Empowered by her narrative but apprehensive of what lay ahead, she could feel the transformation beginning to crystallize. And as she exited the stage, her heart racing with energy, a new question arose. Would her journey lead towards genuine reconciliation, or would she be left to navigate the chasm the past had created? As Sarah walked off the stage, the jubilant applause still ringing in her ears, a wave of adrenaline surged through her. For the first time, she felt a sense of authenticity that had eluded her for far too long. Each step echoed a promise she made to herself, to embrace her identity, to own her narrative, and to break free from the shackles of someone else's judgment. Yet, beneath that euphoria lay a hesitance. Was it truly enough to stand firm in her resolve, or would fear seep back in, a familiar intruder in her newly painted reality? The flickering lights bathed the gallery in hues of gold. Sarah exhaled slowly, allowing the energy to settle within her. The vibrant canvases encapsulated her journey, symbols of past pains woven together with strokes of resilience. But her eyes kept gravitating back to Ethan. She scanned the room, searching for an expression that might shed light on his thoughts. How much had he absorbed? Did he see the growth, or was he still ensnared by the fragments of who she used to be? Alone in her thoughts, overwhelmed by the possibilities that lay ahead, she clutched the edge of a nearby easel. She had always had a tendency to externalize her struggles through art, using it as both a shield and a sword. But now it felt like the time to venturing into new territory. Each bold hue represented not just her essence, but also the underlying complexities she had yet to unpack. Reflecting on the burst of courage she had just unleashed, Sarah wondered if she had truly plotted her course toward tearing down the walls that had kept her stifled. The confrontation with Ethan had sparked a flame, but would it flame out? Would it ignite a new path filled with clearer purpose? As the crowd began to dissipate, she spotted her close friend Emily approaching. A smile broke on her lips, a genuine smile reminiscent of an earlier, more carefree time. Emily embraced her tightly, the warmth of friendship wrapping around Sarah like a safety net. "You are incredible," Emily exclaimed, her eyes alight with admiration. "You own that space." "I feel different." "Empowered, but still anxious," Sarah replied, her voice laced with sincerity. "What if this moment just fades into the background?" "Sarah," Emily said firmly, "this is the catalyst for something bigger. You've been brewing your passion for so long, now let it boil over. Don't you see? This isn't just about Ethan or the past. It's about your future and the legacy you'll create." Emily's words ricocheted within her, igniting a desire to take charge. Perhaps the fear of judgment could be redefined into something productive, a drive to reclaim her narrative. It was time to take the next step. She needed to channel her strength into something tangible, beyond mere artistry. The thought of reaching out to other platforms, seeking new audiences, and creating workshops flooded her mind. Each idea felt like a brushstroke towards a new canvas. There was vibrant potential in sharing not only her art but the stories behind it, the lessons learned, and the moments that transformed her. "Emily," she said, her voice gaining conviction, "I think I want to start something bigger: workshops, community talks, a way to connect art with resilience. To help others reclaim their stories." Emily beamed, her infectious enthusiasm resonating within Sarah's burgeoning vision. "Exactly. You already have a message, now it's time to spread it. You can empower others through your journey," she encouraged. "This is just the beginning." With newfound clarity, Sarah surveyed the remnants of the evening, the canvases, the chatter, the echoes of applause. It was exhilarating yet daunting. But, with a sparkle of possibility weaving through her thoughts, the shadows of doubt began to recede. She resolved to take the challenge head-on, diving deeper into her vocation as an artist and a storyteller. As she ventured into the night, a transformative plan began to unfurl in her mind. Leaving behind the remnants of her past would be a conscious choice, one made with intention and passion. And as she stepped out into the cool air, a startling realization struck. This was not merely a shift in her career, but a profound awakening to her true self. But would she be able to confront the emotional barriers and hesitations that loomed ahead? What obstacles would threaten her budding aspirations, and who else might emerge from her past to challenge her resolve? The path ahead was filled with promise and peril, and the first step was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey. The cool air brushed gently against Sarah's skin, breathing life into her thoughts. With Emily beside her, excitement coursed through her veins. The vibrant gallery echoed with the applause that lingered like a sweet, distant melody, yet she felt the weight of 1,000 decisions pressing down the choice to leap into uncharted territory or retreat into the safety of familiarity. The thrill of the unknown contrasted sharply with her instincts, which whispered of caution and fear. "What's next?" Emily asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and enthusiasm. Caution still whispered its warnings, but resolve twisted into determination within Sarah. "I think I need to start those workshops. I want to create a space where we can explore our stories through art. It's not just about me, it's about everyone who feels unheard." Emily nodded, her eyes sparkling with pride. "That's it. Start small, build your community, reach out to friends, and maybe even collaborate with local artists." Sarah's mind raced. The idea of including others felt daunting yet invigorating. She envisioned sessions filled with laughter, vulnerability, and the raw exchange of experiences that art could facilitate. But the question loomed, was she ready to lead? As weeks passed, Sarah immersed herself in preparations for the workshops. She designed a curriculum centered on emotional awareness and artistic expression, each session a promise to unearth untold stories. But beneath the surface, self-doubt lurked, waiting for the right moment to strike. Days turned into weeks, and in moments of solitude, Sarah's thoughts spiraled toward Ethan. His role in her past remained a bittersweet reminder of her journey. Would he support her dreams? Or would the ghosts of their shared history cast shadows over her newfound purpose? The first workshop approached, and Sarah's heart raced with anticipation. She stood in front of a small gathering of eager faces, feeling both a fierce sense of commitment and an overpowering wave of fragility. The walls she had built around herself trembled as she introduced the concept connecting art with personal narratives. "Today, we'll explore not just our art but the stories that drive us," she declared, her voice steadier than she felt inside. Yet as the participants began to share their truths, Sarah found herself captivated by their stories, their struggles a mirror to her own in ways she hadn't expected. Each revelation pierced through the veil of her doubt, allowing her to witness the transformative power of honest expression. As the session progressed, Sarah started to loosen the grip of her hesitations. The workshops blossomed into a sanctuary of creativity and healing. Participants blended colors in an array of emotions, each stroke unraveling layers of vulnerability. Here, she truly felt alive. Here, she was not just an artist, but a guide through the maze of self-discovery. But early success bred new anxieties. She needed exposure, more participants, a wider audience for her message. Would the local community embrace her efforts? What if they turned away, leaving her to question herself all over again? The thought of approaching a community center for a larger venue filled her with trepidation. With each day, the stakes rose. To build her vision, she would need to confront local organizations and navigate through the uncertainty of their responses. It became glaringly clear that it wasn't just about sharing art, it was about how far she was willing to step into the light. Reflecting on Emily's words, this was her chance to assert her voice. As she stood at the edge of her aspirations, ready to dive into the unknown, an unsettling sensation crept over her. Ethan had not been silent in her mind. His presence felt like both an anchor and a weight. She had to confront him, to unravel the past that still tickled her insecurities. But how could she face him without jeopardizing the momentum she had lost so long ago? As she prepared to reach out to organizations, a sense of urgency gripped her heart. The fear of rejection ignited her desire for growth, forcing her to question how intertwined her past truly was with her future. Could she face Ethan, a pillar from her past, while stepping resolutely into her new world? The next chapter awaited her, full of challenges, but one thing was certain: she would no longer be simply a spectator in her life. It was time to actively choose her role in every act. With the horizon stretching ahead, she steeled herself for what lay around the corner. The shadows of uncertainty loomed larger, but invigorated her resolve. Her journey was just beginning, and the biggest question remained: would confronting her past lead her to newfound freedom or deeper entanglements? As the first rays of dawn filtered through Sarah's studio window, she could feel the quiet intensity of change surrounding her life. Reflection from the night before replayed in her mind her connection with art, the empowering responses from workshop participants, the tension lingering from her confrontation with Ethan. Every breath felt like an anticipation of what's ahead. This was not just another morning, it was the dawn of a transformative chapter. Filled with resolve, Sarah ventured out to face the day. Each day was a choice to cultivate her newfound identity as an artist and mentor. In the weeks following her first workshop, the momentum built unrelentingly. Through community postings and networking, larger groups began to populate her sessions. Every new participant brought a splash of energy, each unique narrative adding depth to the fabric they collectively wove. But alongside the thrill of growth, a crystal-clear realization emerged. Confronting Ethan was no longer an option, it was a necessity. The layers of her past needed to unfurl in the face of burgeoning self-acceptance and professional success. Shaking off any remnants of trepidation, Sarah reached for her phone, her heart pounding as she dialed Ethan's number. The line rang, each tone echoing the murmur of her thoughts. How would he react? Would anyone arrive in the aftermath of her vulnerability? When he finally picked up, Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. "Ethan, I'd like to meet. There's something important I want to discuss." His reticent reply pricked a new wave of anxiety, but she insisted. This was her awakening, her time to reclaim her narrative. The day of their meeting arrived, the sun brightening the path ahead as she made way to the quaint coffee shop that had once held a different meaning for her. Sarah could feel the weight of the past lingering, but she walked resolutely forward. Today was about closure, a reclamation of her spirit. As she sat at the chosen corner table and waited, doubt rattled her resolve, echoing fears that he would still dismiss her as just a nurse. When he entered, she took a deep breath, welcoming clarity into her heart. Ethan looked quizzical as he approached. This was her moment. "Sarah," he offered, settling into the chair across from her. "It's been a while." "Yeah, it has. But I think it's time we talked about our past and my future." The tremor in her voice faded as she locked eyes with him, the flutter of vulnerability swimming against her resolve. With each word, Sarah unfolded her narrative, the struggles, the shadows, and ultimately her creative evolution. She shared success stories from her workshops, the cathartic release that art could bring, and how their past shaped but no longer defined her. As she spoke, she felt an unwavering strength course through her. The apprehension began to peel away, replaced with a fierce sense of pride. Ethan listened intently, the phantoms of judgment drifting away with every heartfelt sentence. As she completed her tale, a heavy silence filled the space, the weight of her truth settling between them. "You've changed," he finally said, his tone devoid of derision, "and I can't say I saw it coming." "Your work, it's impressive." "Thank you," Sarah responded, surprising herself with how genuine the gratitude felt. "It's taken a lot of introspection to get here. It's not just about the art, it's about owning who I am. And I won't let someone else's perception determine my worth anymore." In that moment, she realized something monumental. She wasn't seeking his validation. She had come to offer closure, to express that the scars were just pathways to growth. As they parted ways, Sarah felt lighter, liberated not just from the shackles of Ethan's past judgments, but also from those she had placed on herself. Each step was pronounced and deliberate, each breath filled with the essence of newfound authenticity. She walked away, achieving an openness that had once been stifled. Days passed, and while she stepped deeper into her new role as an art mentor, she noticed her confidence swelling. Workshops turned into discussions, her art transformed her environment, and the vibrant connections flourished like wildflowers during spring's first bloom, courageous, resilient, and glorious. Finally, Sarah looked around at the space. She had created a tapestry rich with stories, resilience, and powerful connections. She had achieved something profound not just in the public realm, but deep within herself. She reached for her journal, wrote fervently about her path's pain, growth, self-acceptance. Her art had become an expression of her soul, and she was becoming a beacon for others. In receiving validation from herself, she uncovered authenticity. She saw her identity reflected not just in her canvases, but in the smiles of those she mentored. No longer was she merely the nurse with a paintbrush. She was an artist, a storyteller, and above all, a woman who had transcended the limitations of her own past. As Sarah stepped outside into the lush, hopeful air, she breathed in deeply, feeling pride swell in her chest, a sender of hope. Empowerment radiated from the center of her being, her transformation complete. This was her achievement, and now, the sky was truly the limit. Now, I urge you, don't wait any longer. This is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Remember, every action makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's incredible journey below, and most importantly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories know the impact of supporting the channel through these acts.